Well, hello. In a world where we can build bridges with our words, right? Or tear them down, how do we actually navigate the most sensitive and polarizing topics with confidence? So, whether or not you're a speaker, a guide, or just someone faced with a tough question, Kristen Robinson is here to show us how we can turn controversy into connection. And Kristen is the developer of impact storytelling, and she has worked with many organizations and very, I would say, energetic situations to bring everybody together. Kristen, thanks so much for joining me today.
Happy to be here, Pat.
Yeah, so you're going to be our upcoming speaker at the NSA Connecticut chapter meeting on March 13th. And we are going to be filling the room with hopefully a lot of inviting conversation. But I want to talk and start out by saying, what is the biggest mistake speakers make when really addressing sensitive topics?
Sure. Uh, Oftentimes, anything that has become caught up, whether it's in politics, whether it is just the uncertainty around change, people will start dividing themselves into two camps. I call this the binary. The most simple binary, us and them. Everybody who's like me is us. Everybody who is like you is them. And never the twain shall meet. If, as speakers, if, as communicators, we let that binary stand, we give ourselves an uphill battle trying to call everybody in to the same conversation because the gulf is simply so wide.
So, how do you bridge that gulf? Like, how do you get people to say, that feels more like me, or I'm not like them? It gets tense.
Absolutely. And we are complicated creatures. We have so many different parts of our identity, and given any topic at all, we can get excited about some of it and be worried about some of the other of it. And so, if the only options for me are I am team change, I am opposed to change, but my personal experience and hopes and fears and worries are somewhere in the middle, I am now kind of forced into a camp that doesn't really feel right. And it can feel like there is no place for my complicated, nuanced self in the conversation. So the solution is to actually create some other places to be other than the two poles, places where somebody who is, yeah, I'm a little bit this side and I'm a little bit that side, places where that person can see themselves in your framing of the situation.
Okay, so walk me through that a little bit, because I feel like sometimes when we're speaking these days, we are pretty much editing our conversations. Oops, we don't want to, So what happens and how do you walk me through that?
Sure. I will straight up tell you there is no replacement for going on a listening campaign, by which I mean, if you are the one who is going to be standing up in front of a room full of people or facilitating a smaller group set of conversations, you need to be prepared by understanding some of those nuanced points of view. You need to understand how people describe their position, because the way, if I think change is a great idea, but I'm worried about its impact on my future job prospects, I will describe myself in a way that makes those two hopes and fears seem very legitimate. If then a speaker comes in and says it's illegitimate to have certain fears, then they're losing me as an audience member. So, step one, go on that listening campaign, try to understand the different types of complex perspectives that are out there and how do people describe themselves. So that if you were to try to describe my complicated, nuanced response to your situation, to your framing, you do it in a way that I say, yeah, that is how I think. That is how I feel. That does represent me fairly. I'm still with you. And I would actually suggest, you mentioned editing ourselves. There's a couple ways to think about editing ourselves. If by editing we mean, okay, I'm just not going to say what I think, I am not going to say true things about true things, I would argue there may be a place for judiciously listening before you speak, but holding back your truth is not what I'm talking about. I would think more the word curate. I curate my words, I curate my approach so that when I do say true things about true things, I do it in a way that is most likely for my listeners to understand, to nod along, to say, okay, so far I'm with you on this. Even if I don't agree with you yet, I'm intrigued.
But I think people are really fearful to be curious because they don't want to offend.
I think that there is that number one, I think that's true. I think people are concerned about putting their view out there in a way that is offensive to someone else. I do think the antidote for that is curiosity. Curiosity says, "Tell me more about you. Tell me more about how you came to the beliefs. What were the life experiences that inspired your philosophy?" Curiosity, in my experience, is about the least offensive thing because you are showing that you care first and foremost about somebody else's experience before you're going to chime in with your own. And if you're worried that that chime in might not land well, you can always ask, thank you for telling me your thoughts on this. I see it a little different. My experience is a little different. What could I share with you? And if they're open to it, go for it.
I like it. It's always good to say, "Tell me more about that." I
Ah,
always consider myself an Olympic listener, and I'm listening, I'm listening, I'm listening. However, I would like to also contribute to the conversation as well. So, in this meeting that we're going to be having coming up next month, you're going to be talking about a framework that really calls people into a conversation. So, that brings the poles, as you say, together, which I think is going to be very useful for us.
yeah, I hope so. It's something that I have seen work time and time again. You give people more opportunities to hold on to their beliefs without thinking like you, the speaker, have just called them a bad person, right? That's never what we want, is for our audience to feel like
Oh,
we have just scolded them, right?
yes. Oh, no.
So yeah, you let people be who they are, bring their entire selves into a conversation, and you explore it together. And that, I think, is one of the really powerful things about this framework, whether you're speaking or facilitating.
And I'm sure you use storytelling in your conversations because storytelling helps people visualize and understand, oh, wait a minute. Okay, I see myself in that person, or I could see a tiny bit of myself in that example. So, is that something that you employ often?
Absolutely. I think that there is almost nothing as powerful as a good story, unless you're pairing that story with a question that allows people to reflect on their own lives. And you juxtapose those two things, the story, the question, all within this framework that says it's okay for you to be you and still in this conversation. Now you've created something really powerful. I would throw one other thing in there about a story, and you alluded to it. Stories follow a character. They follow a person. It's not just a sequence of events. It's a sympathetic character. It's somebody that we can relate to, and the story follows them on a journey that has a little bit of risk. Because anytime we are stepping into a touchy subject, that's a risky thing for the speaker and for the listener. When we can create a little bit of that empathy, allowing our listeners to follow along with a story, we give them a little bit of safe space. Okay, in the story, it played out like this. I can stay open to this. I can stay open to having that same outcome in this conversation we're having right now.
Kristen Robinson, you are going to be creating space for us to have rich conversations. We're really looking forward to your visit on March 13th in Connecticut. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll see you very soon.
Sounds great.
And if you'd like to join our empowerment meeting, please go to nsact.org to sign up. I want to see you there. Let's talk about difficult conversations, but maybe they'll become easier.